problem with organic is you can't guarantee distribution. You're sort of relying on what you get. It's too much about look at me and what I'm doing and what I'm up to. Find acquisition targets that are small but have great SEO and buy them not for the revenue. Well, the issue everyone's facing these days is the mental spam filter of people are inundated with so much shit, they're not going to trust it if they just hear you say it. You have to find ways to get past that.
Welcome back to Revenue Mechanics, a series where we discuss the inner workings of revenue engines with revenue leaders from around the world. And today we have with us a leader on the front line as an investor, an advisor, and a co-founder of Aware and Revenue Zen. Alex Boyd, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Sam. Thank you.
My pleasure. Good to have you here. To kick things off, let's jump straight into Revenue Zen as you guys are literally on the front line of what's working today and working directly with clients in the market, solving these challenges on a day-to-day basis. And I know your philosophy aligns to building better buying experiences, which is what I preach and what we're all about as well. What trends are you seeing in the market at the moment that are helping your clients win without damaging the market or reputation as they grow and scale?
Yeah, there's a lot there. And so I'm working on revenues in the agency with clients more on kind of the strategy level. And then I'm just doing this myself. So all the things that I'm talking about are things I do myself as a bootstrapped SaaS founder through Aware. So I'm kind of taking everything that I know and have learned and then reapplying as well. Some things that we did to grow revenues in. So there's our own stuff and there's stuff we're doing for clients, which we like to have a significant overlap there. So for revenues in, we did a lot of LinkedIn, we do a lot of SEO, meaning personal profile of the founder being one of the biggest lead generators for the company. We do the same thing in SaaS. So I'm also generating leads for SaaS. And then for clients, same idea. So Revenues in is actually no longer doing LinkedIn branding work directly, but we and I personally ended up investing in a variety of LinkedIn agencies. So we're just sort of building positions in agencies that do LinkedIn for founders and companies as well in different ways. So that's been kind of the interesting business model there. But yeah, what we're seeing is like, not to get too deep into the tactics of LinkedIn, for example, but not posting company blog content and just sort of sharing the generic things that your marketing team asks you to send. But if you're a founder, not posting just about your product, but having people get to know who built the product and why. So like if you look at my feed, for example, you'll see a lot of just straight up sign up for a free trial. Here's this new feature. Here's why you want it, mixed with here's what I believe, here's why we're building this thing. So when the feature posts come out, you kind of understand the context. And you don't just think, okay, here's this thing that I'm maybe kind of skeptical of. Who are you and why did you build this? But I sort of have an idea of who this person is. And I say, I mean, now the audience. And you can process that in context. So if you help any SaaS company do this, or even any agency, it's, if it's SaaS, your product is a tool, a platform. If it's an agency, your product is your knowledge. But either way, you're going to have these more, for example, like conversion posts, and you'll have more trust building posts. So that's like in 30 seconds, the high level of things that are working well for example, LinkedIn for founders. I'm doing more, one of my favorite plays that's not to do with LinkedIn right now per se, is to find acquisition targets that are small, but have great SEO and buy them not for the revenue. We'll value them based on low revenue, but mostly in my head, be thinking about buying them for the SEO we can merge into the company. I've done this twice for agencies and about to do another time for SaaS as well. But we're also helping clients do that through Revenues in too. So like have two venture-backed companies, one of which is a client, and they came to us and they said, well, this other company is going out of business. We're thinking of putting in a lowball offer just to sort of get their stuff, their remaining customers, their tech. And we said, well, this is great because they have all these page one positions SEO wise. So one of the tactics we're using there is saying, how can we essentially lowball our way into buying page one real estate so that we have, number one, you have, by the time people have Googled for the solution, they know who you are because they've seen you on LinkedIn. They've encountered your brand elsewhere. Then they're looking for the category. You have them find you again there. And you're doing all this as profitably as possible. So like 2-3 years ago, you're spending, ungodly amounts of money to acquire customers, and it's just no longer something people can afford to do. I mean, they frankly couldn't afford to do back then, but definitely not today. So those are like two things we're seeing that are interesting. So not just blogging for SEO, but like acquiring your SEO. And then two, sort of structuring these LinkedIn focused programs for founders and teams, and then doing that in this sort of trust building plus conversion oriented way. I mean, those are two things that are working super well. There's a bunch of stuff that's working. I'm not a paid media guy, so like I can't really speak to that, but I know some people are doing really good work there. I'm an investor in an outbound sales agency. I can't really speak to that as much, but like, for example, Kellen Casebeer is doing phenomenal work with just like the clay jockeying I'm seeing coming out of some of these companies is just nuts. It's amazing. Anything to get past the mental spam filter. I mean, that's the issue everyone's facing these days, is the mental spam filter of people are inundated with so much shit. They're not going to trust it if they just hear you say it. You have to find ways to get past that. Whether that's an authentic brand, SEO real estate that you're owning, whether it's a relevant signal you're using to automatically structure your outbound, whatever it is, I'm agnostic to that. The idea is just how do you get past that spam filter when it is as high as it's ever been, right? You can no longer email an organization and say, who's the appropriate person to discuss your, payables process? And in the past, they would just answer you. Like, imagine those days, right? If you took these people today and put them 20 years ago, like sometimes there's a thing about what a field day we would have with that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but those are like two things, and plus some illusions, other things that are working well. And there's just so much that is working well and so much that doesn't anymore.
There's quite a few threads to pull on there, but it sounds
Yeah.
like philosophy almost ties back to a little bit of the old Gary Vee jab jab right hook, throw some value, provide value, but litter in your call to actions. And I spoke to Scott Leese last week, and he said one of the biggest challenges that companies are facing is obviously the changing times. And as you just alluded to then, it's not like it was 10, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago to today. Things are shifting very rapidly. And one of those evolutions has become the founder-led brand or revenue engine, where the founder is the face of the company. When working with founders that are maybe open to that transition and becoming the face of the company, what sort of mindset and approaches do you help them get into to shift it from look at me, this is all about what I do, to versus how they get into the customer's mindset, the prospect's mindset, and provide value in the marketplace?
That's a good question. There's a lot of reasons people don't do this, as you mentioned, because they either, well, some people want it to be about them too much, and it's too much about look at me and what I'm doing and what I'm up to, sort of the Facebook error, if you want to call it that. And there's people who think it's that and would never want to do it that way, but they think that's what you're supposed to do, and they're afraid of doing any personal branding because they see it as that. So there's people who are afraid of doing the Facebook error, and the flaw is that's not how you should be doing it. And there's people who commit the Facebook error, so to speak, without even being afraid of it. They're just sort of unabashedly like, selfie. Why are people not buying my product? Like, well, you're not giving them a reason to. So there's other really common ones as well that are like, well, what do people care what I have to say is one, which is, I forget the name of the fallacy, but it's whatever the fallacy is where you know a lot of stuff and you discount the value of your own knowledge. That's a big one as well, but a lot of reasons. So how do we kind of tie things together? The biggest way that we typically do that, and on the agency side, we help people construct this. For my own brand, I just do it for myself, but the idea of a strategic narrative is, why are you the person doing this at the company or with this company right now, and where have you come from and where are you going? If you do that, you kind of think about it's not just the company, right? So on the one hand, you could just put out only things the company's doing, product features you're launching, acquisitions you're making, funds you've raised, blah, 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 all the company stuff.
Mm.
And you might think, okay, well, it's either that or I only talk about me and just here's my dog, here's my, my face, here's what I do on the weekends. Like, neither one of those is compelling. I think the compelling thing is to figure out how they fit together. So why are you, the person with all of your beliefs, backgrounds, and goals, doing this, the company with all of its, launches, context, and so forth? So, for example, I could tell you 10 things about me over LinkedIn posts out of context, and then I can give you 10 features that my software does. Neither one by itself is particularly interesting. But if I sort of give you a sense of why I, the person, have put a lot of stock in LinkedIn, to illustrate the reasoning behind why I thought building Aware was so compelling, which then influenced the development of these features, which do this, now it starts to fit together of like, okay, so part of the narrative is LinkedIn is a hugely underutilized channel, and most people just get it wrong. They see it as a resume builder or a prospecting channel. Neither one is right. So that's the broken thing, right? And then you have if you're listening for this and thinking this sounds like the Challenger sale, it is. It's basically that, but in marketing format. So you have your problem, right? What's wrong with the world? You have your reframe. Well, first you're deepening. Why is this problem so bad? What's going to happen if you keep using LinkedIn to spam your contacts and post company blogs? Well, you'll waste a lot of time, which is the biggest currency you have in this, and money. You won't make much money by doing those things. The reframe is to look at LinkedIn as a personal brand channel that is not strictly personal. It's sort of you, the person, doing these professional things. The way to do that is, well, it's what we've been discussing. Finally, at the end of this, you have your product, what it does. So that's the way I help founders think of it is there's your product, there's you, but if you build this narrative out of where did you come from? What have you been doing in your career? And why did you build this thing or company or product, whatever that you've built? And then talk about what it does. So much more success because people have context to the things you're supposed to get them to buy as a result of. Why did you found this SEO agency? Why are you running this podcast? Put all this stuff in context for me. That's really the key to unlocking on LinkedIn, I think, is to figure out that narrative. It is not purely professional. It's not purely personal. It's necessarily both woven together. And when you nail that, you have it. Why does Gary Vee operate a marketing agency? Well, look at all the stuff he said about his background and how he grew up and his family's business and how that led him to do what he's doing. That's why we like it. Why does Elon Musk tweet about all sorts of shit that doesn't have to do with Tesla and SpaceX? Because we want to know why you're building it, and that's why it's such a cult following to him and his businesses. So I'm not saying be Elon and be Gary Vee and do it your own way, but that's the core essence of it. Give people the reason, the context, the understanding behind the story, and the features and the pricing and all that stuff is just the tip of the iceberg. If you only give the tip of the iceberg, people will run away, be like, I don't believe you. Give them everything, and then it starts to make sense.
And being one of the, probably say, like, as I mentioned to you before the call, I've been following your work for a while, and you're obviously known as one of the, I'll say, forefront thinkers in the LinkedIn space, in the revenue world of revenue generation, specifically using LinkedIn to drive a lot of business, and obviously you're helping founders do that now as well. With that sort of approach, what benefit are you seeing, not just for companies in terms of growth, but for the buyers as well, in terms of the quality of prospects and leads that come through, the retention, the growth? As I feel like that's one of the big misses that people that are trapped in, say, the quantitative side of how many leads you're getting, how many this, et cetera, and they don't look at the buying experience as a whole and the back end of what results on that. With this type of approach, how are you seeing that shift the way buyers actually come to you and then do business with you?
Yeah, I mean it's so different. If everyone listening thinks about the way that they buy stuff, it hopefully, if you really get into that mindset, will shape how you sell stuff. I had a revenues and client on the agency side back when we were doing more outbound lead gen, maybe 5 years ago. And we were getting into the problem behind their outbound sales system. And this is kind of the antithesis of what you're saying. And he was saying, like, okay, cool. Well, our conversion rate from outbound meeting to deal is 5%. I was like, okay, that's super low. Like what's going on? And instead of digging into like the sales process and how we were getting the leads and we should be trying some other things, he was just like, no, the spreadsheet says we need to generate now way more meetings. And then so we were just like, I don't think that's gonna really help. And we didn't say no to the client. We just said we'll just try to help this process by, working on copy and deliverability and so forth. And they started to get more meetings, and then the conversion rate kind of held pretty steady. And he was just like, well, we need more meetings. So we need more deals. So now we just need ever more meetings. And I sort of, at that point, was just like, okay, we need to take a step back and look at why people aren't buying from this process. We're sending out just an absolute ton of emails. We're getting 50, 60 meetings a month from, at the time, one SDR, which was pretty phenomenal. But it required just torching the market. And people were taking meetings because they were just like, okay, I'll take this meeting. But when they show up to the meeting, what happens then? And every marketer, every founder who has not been in sales, it's harder for them to get this, because if you have been in sales, when somebody shows up to a meeting, like there's on the spectrum of ready to buy on one hand. On the other hand is like, I'm in the car eating lunch, I'm 10 minutes late. I just sort of like took this because I wanted to hear your pitch, but I don't really care. And your win rate on those good meetings is just so much higher than your win rate on the bad meetings. So like, okay, how do we get more of the good ones? Well, then it necessarily means that you can't just be focused on the number of meetings, because at some point you actually burn time and you don't make any more revenue from it. So how do you get more good meetings? Well, you want them to show up warm. How do you win people before they show up? Well, you make them like and trust you and your brand. And if you do that on LinkedIn with what we've been talking about, with trust building content and just authentic, narrative driven personal brand, they're going to show up having consumed months of your content. So you won't have to answer a bunch of questions that don't make sense. They'll ideally have started to adopt your belief system about whatever the thing is that you're selling. So they'll sort of be on board already. They'll have seen your case studies. They'll have referenced mutual connections. They'll have done all this work to sort of know already what social proof there is, and it'll have been sunk in to their psyche at that point. So you don't need your social proof slide. So you basically just shortcut most of what your discovery call would have been, and you're just sort of in the the pitching process. Sometimes it's more like you have to do more of those things, but you get the leads way in advance because they're reaching out when they're in their eval process rather than when they're purchasing process. Now, in that case, we've actually noticed that sales cycles can be longer, but win rates are higher. So like with revenues, and the win rate on LinkedIn sourced leads is like twice as high as on non-LinkedIn sourced leads, apart from warm referrals. Those are it's the same win rate as warm referrals, which is saying something, but much higher than any other source. So it's just sort of that in action. But the sales cycle is like 30% longer. Why? They're contacting you earlier in the process because you're building trust, and they're saying, I'm going to let you into my buying process when I'm evaling and thinking about the topic versus when I'm in vendor selection. Much better place to be. You want to reach them earlier as possible or guide the decision-making process. They're not going to let you in to do that unless you've been building trust. So to sum up, you're going to get increased win rates, maybe longer sales cycles, but that's a good thing, and higher deal sizes as well. You'll also get much more of this trust that bleeds into, like you said, retention. And retention means if they came to you via this warm approach, they're going to contact you much more. If things go wrong with the solution in any way, they're going to have the trust to reach out rather than not saying anything and just canceling. So you buy yourself that kind of that first call, that like something's going wrong, I want to talk to somebody, versus like a something's going wrong, fuck these people approach, which is the common issue with SaaS churn. Is like, I don't know you, I sign up, I use it, I don't know you, so I don't say anything, and then I just cancel. And to the SaaS company side, it's like, what just happened? Well, you didn't earn the right to get that first call. So they
Yeah.
didn't make it. So a lot of ways, yeah, retention LTV, sales cycle does go up, but win rate goes up too. And you just spend lots less time on shitty pitches, pitching to people that are, camera off, eating lunch late, blah, blah, blah. Anyone who's been in sales knows like, oh, that was a shit lead. You get fewer shit leads basically is what happens.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the benefits that you and I have in terms of our careers. Started in the sales side and then learned and adapted the marketing elements
Yeah.
post that, because we know what it's like to play on both sides now versus just one or the other. And that's the exact experience I had in the first company. So for us, we primarily focus on paid advertising, which commonly in the market is sold as a lead gen approach. We'll run ads to get you more leads, etc. I look at it as more of an amplification of what the business is doing. So a business that is going to succeed through paid ads is a business that has the things that you're talking about in place already that can just be amplified to a wider audience because the message is already proven and resonating. If you're doing a lead gen approach, which the very first company I worked in and sold in, they had that same sort of X plus X equals Y, solve for X sort of mentality, where it was book 50 meetings a week, do 15 discoveries, do 10 pitches, and hopefully you'll close half of them. And they kept trying to run that system, and sometimes it would hit those numbers, sometimes it wouldn't, but there were two major things that happened that kind of either the company got stuck for a long time, but eventually they closed down the company and went off and did something else. First thing that got stuck was the sales team. So they burnt through, basically every 6 months they were burning through an entire sales team again. I stayed there for a year and I was the longest standing servant over that period, which is, says something. And every time they tried to scale that number, because if it's just one rep, for example, like you can sort of run that lead gen approach. They can sift through, try and find the gold, spend their day, like it's a waste of time and stuff, but you can make it work and it can be profitable. As soon as you try and scale that, especially whether it's with, for them, it was with paid ads, and you're pushing into wider and wider audiences that have no clue who you are, and you're using clickbait, different offers, etc., to try and get people into the pipeline and then nudging them through. Even if you do get the sale, because it's based on a hyped up promise, if they don't see that result in a relatively short window, they're like, this doesn't work, you guys suck, I'm out. And as you said, they either just cancel straight out the gate, or in this case, the company actually had 10 clients come back and demand a refund not long after, I think probably 6 months or so after I left. There were clients demanding refunds, and that's why they decided to close it down. On the flip side, the next company I went to had a founder-led brand, strong presence in the market, known as an authority for what they sell, and amplified that with paid ads to get more attention, eyeballs, etc. And I was the only seller there, so I basically took over the founder in sales. And we had an 86% closing rate. People were coming through when it wasn't because obviously I was amazing at sales. It was because there was trust built. So by the time I called them up, the first line that always came out of my mouth was like, hey, this is Sam calling from XYZ. We received your inquiry or your application regarding this. Is that something you're serious about? So it wasn't even like a great opening line. But because there was so much trust, they're like, oh, yeah, I am. Cool. And I would only have to have like a 5-minute discovery, move into a pitch, and then they would close at an extremely high rate. So I saw that difference between a well-oiled system and a bad system running. But that old system from the first company is still super prevalent in the market today. And obviously you're championing more of the founder-led growth, building message, brand, etc. What do you see as one of the reasons why people or companies and leaders are still clinging to that X plus X equals Y sort of approach?
Doesn't require you to to venture anything. To build a founder-led brand, you have to risk some things, right? Like I don't mean financial risk. I mean, it's usually less financial risk, but you have to risk like yourself personally, your thoughts, your beliefs, and just your opinions. So you have to risk those things. And it's amazing how how much money people are willing to light on fire to not risk those things. I mean, there are things that you have an infinite amount of to give, um, and people just don't want to do it. They just prefer to hide behind the corporate shell, the logo, um, and sort of just dump money into lead gen ads because it there's this lack of empathy with the buying process, like you said, of just like, well, I mean, this many meetings, this many leads, this many deals, just put more money in.
Mm,
Um, there is a somewhat valid point about, well, I want to be able to sell this company soon. And if it's all based on me, how do I sell it? Um, that kind of like you said, like scaling a personal brand with paid, great idea, very doable. Um, Taking a strong personal founder brand and using that as the baseline foundation to build a personal branding system for the company, super scalable, very acquirable, not an issue. So the main thing that people have an issue with on that, I think, who are thinking about this in the right way, are thinking, well, does it impact my M&A prospects?
mm,
Um, Having bought and sold companies from people with and without personal brands, like it affects it positively, as long as it's not solely reliant on it, right? So if the company really can't generate revenue without the founder knocking on their doors of their contacts, that's not good. But that's not really what we're referring to. We're referring to like the founder being able to do branding essentially with their themselves and their insights, um, as opposed to just sort of having the company brand do all the work. Um, so yeah, we can show people all this data and experiential anecdotes and numbers about how it's going to be way more profitable and efficient to grow a company with founder-led brand, and then scale based on that. Um, but at the end of the day, they're still going to have this like nagging feeling of like, well, that would require me to show who I am publicly, and I don't want to do that.
mm.
Okay, how bad do you want it? Like you want to get a worse CAC, longer payback periods, like sure, don't do it. Like, great, but you're just making that trade-off. Oh, it doesn't scale. Okay, great. Look at all the B2B companies, large and small, that are growing and have invested in founder-led brands. Um, I mean, shit, like why did Bill Gates make a documentary? Like, why does Musk tweet all the time? There's so many like I read, I mean, even in finance, right? Steve Schwartzman, the founder and CEO of Blackstone, wrote a whole book. He's not doing LinkedIn. I mean, he is doing LinkedIn. His team's running it. But like, point is, that's his way of still having a founder personal brand. Whether you write a book or do LinkedIn, that doesn't actually matter that much. The point is, the founder getting their beliefs and insights out there is a profitable, efficient way to grow all the way up to multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies. It does scale. So like we need to really just can that objection in its tracks. And yeah, like you said, paid is a fantastic way to build on that foundation. Say this is working. Now let's treat it like marketing and treat this like content and then scale it. Guarantee consumption. Once we know that people will buy in droves, once they encounter our beliefs, opinions, and ideas about the industry that we're in, pay to guarantee distribution.
Yeah.
The problem with organic is you can't guarantee distribution. You're sort of relying on what you get. So paid is a natural way to increase that. I'm not a paid guy. I have done a little bit of thought leadership ads. Fits great with our strategy. Those work so well. They're freaking cheap. If you have a post that does well, hit the thought leader ads button basically and boost it to the right people.
Yeah.
I mean, we get like engagements from CMOs for 90 cents a like. Like, why would you not do that? Um, I don't need them to fill out a lead gen form. I just want them to encounter our brand so that by the time they're ready, they know to reach out. I want them to get that call warm.
Mm,
And if they encounter the same type of content, they're not going to care too much if it was promoted by the company or not. But as the brand, you can amplify that founder content. We've mentioned Gary Vee a few times, but like they're scaling just fine with a personal brand. Shit, Hormozy's trying to become a billionaire and he's investing heavily in personal branding, heavily.
mm.
And like, okay, you don't want to do it. You're a seed stage SaaS company who you think you just can run lead gen ads all day. Like, you think it doesn't scale? Why would they be doing it if it didn't work? It's a funny thing that people they have this weird head trash around it.
Yeah.
And I haven't I feel like I've diagnosed it, but I don't have a magic key to be like, I turn it and you stop believing the stuff that you shouldn't believe, but that's just human nature. So we can't.
Yeah. And that's I think you touched on a point there that's one of the key delineations that I try and get founders to think about when it comes to paid ads. So like one of the first questions I've asked when someone reaches out to us for help in that area is, what's your belief around ads? What are they used for? And if they say anything around getting more leads to get more sales, I'm like, okay, explain that a bit more to me, because in my mind, it's the only difference between ads and organic is, as you said, organic doesn't have guaranteed distribution, ads have guaranteed distribution. But the best performing ad campaigns always stem from good organic content
Mm-hmm.
that is just amplified and pushed out to a wider audience because the message is validated over here. It's proven to attract buyers, it's proven to attract prospects, and your right audience. Why not stick money behind it and just push it to a wider group rather than, again, like throwing some clickbait offer out and getting people through? But to do that, you need to start with ideally a founder-led brand so that, again, the people, because at the end of the day, business is obviously a founder's baby for a long period. And a lot of those initial beliefs, philosophies, values that are instilled in the company come from the founder. So if you want someone to fall in love with the company, probably a good idea to have them fall in love with the founder. Now,
Yep.
understand the potential bottleneck of, will it, if I'm the face and all of that, will someone buy the business? Will it be grow of value? Uh, yes, like as you said with Gary Vee, Elon Musk, etc. Now they can pop off multiple companies and they all just go like that. The Rock, Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds is freaking
Yep.
awesome at this.
Yeah.
uh, Leveraging his personal brand, his face to just pop companies and blow them up. But to a founder that is thinking like, okay, I'm on board with the idea of being a founder-led brand, but I also don't want the business to be 100% reliant on my face because I want to do these other ventures. I've noticed obviously a lot of companies start leveraging their executives and other team members to start coming into the play and actually helping promote themselves as thought leaders as well. You mentioned
Yeah.
securing SEO real estate as another play too. At what point does a founder start to look outside of the founder-led motion to bolster their ecosystem and be more effective in those various areas?
I mean, soon, right? Like it's you can take this too far and just do branding and never do any lead gen, and then it's the opposite problem where you're like tons of people are aware of you and nobody actually buys from you. And not really. Branding does create lead gen, but you can have that issue. Um, so yes, like start doing outbound, start doing SEO, start doing paid, all these things. Like, but ideally you've done them once you've seeded the market with more awareness from your personal brand efforts. Um, you can accomplish this with paid by running brand awareness ads, for example, or consumption focused ads as the outcome. Um, you could do that too, but like the minimum viable founder brand strategy of founder brand plus low hanging fruit lead gen is phenomenal. If you've reached 100,000 people in your ICP with your content, just start doing outbound as you otherwise would, or even like lead gen as you otherwise would. I mean, your Google ads will perform better if people have just mentally heard of you and your brand before, because they're gonna search and they're gonna see 3 ads and they're gonna be like, oh, I know those people, and they click on yours. Suddenly you have this inexplicably better ad efficiency score, and you're like, well, why would that be? People know you. I mean, it's that simple. So yeah, there can be an issue with you do a ton of awareness, you don't do any lead gen, and you're just leaving money on the table. Frankly, my agency did that for a long time. We just didn't do any of our own outbound. We should have, and we just relied too heavily on brand awareness, which was fine and better than most agencies were doing. But we should have done more. And I say this in hindsight.
Yep.
I'm probably still kind of guilty of that with Aware. Um, but I mean, that's why we're doing, like, I literally have checking my email before this recording to see if we've signed this acquisition agreement to buy a competitor with really good SEO, because it's time to change that. It's time to change the like purely reliant on brand um, motion we've had and flip on the switch of doing more lead gen. So your question was, how do you know when it's the right time, or when do you know it's the right time? No one good answer. It's just like look at all the metrics of views, impressions, brand awareness, Are you just getting a bunch of organic free trials every day? Cool. Then you probably have pretty good brand awareness. Is it sort of dead unless you do outbound? Well, you probably don't.
Mm.
I mean, that's a whether or not you have a free trial process, like, are you getting a bunch of organic leads? Is your organic word of mouth lead gen growing month over month? These are just a couple of things you might ask to figure that out. Um, I mean, I guess the real answer is start doing cold lead gen from day one, because you can always cherry pick the best leads.
Yeah.
And I mean, that kind of harkens back to your story about the sales team where you expanded the purview of lead gen and results kind of tanked because you went outside of the cherry pick zone. So yeah, do your cherry pick lead gen all day. Expand that once you're getting these metrics of like, okay, I'm getting more word of mouth leads, I'm getting more. That number is expanding month over month. Our content impressions are, in the six figures or seven figures. Those are all just signs you might want to expand your direct response lead gen efforts. Um, and you want this to kind of be in balance, right? It's kind of like hiring more sales reps, but not enough demand gen SDR marketing bandwidth. There's like a rubber band between the closing bandwidth of people or tools or processes that turn interest into revenue and the generation of demand. And there's like a rubber band where like you pull closing too much and then the demand gen has to catch up and vice versa. And then you pull demand gen above and then closing has to catch up. If they get too far apart, you have either AEs with empty calendars, which is not good, they cost money, or you have burnt out sales reps, or just like more demand than you are converting to revenue. So you're just sort of leaving money on the table. So you're either spending too much or leaving money on the table. The question of how to construct the ideal mix of sort of closing conversion rate focused things and demand gen things, that's not a thing we can answer in general. It takes a skilled partner to kind of look at your process and say, well, it seems like we should reinvest a little more here, here, and here. That's what the inordinate amount of consultants, agencies, fractionals, and in-house executive leaders do. But that's the idea. If you get the sense you have too much demand, you're not converting much of it, as much of it as you should, build more there. If you have sort of sellers with low win rates and crickets on their calendar, that's a sign to do the opposite. Probably need a smaller sales team and more demand gen. Um, Getting that thing in balance is just golden. I mean, you're just sort of spending the right amount of money, everything feels good. It's just like that's when it like works. It works when that balance is really aligned and you can kind of just feel it. Like it feels solid. I've been the head of sales in when it's like working and the momentum is palpable. I've also been the head of growth in cases where that was out of balance and the tension was like it was
Mm.
the opposite. Like it was a negative vibe. Um, in person, you can kind of feel the negative vibe of we're not doing enough demand gen. Everyone's sort of like it's just the sales desk is too quiet. That's kind of what it ends up as.
Yeah.
So when do you start? Right away, but like keep those efforts in balance as you grow. Demand gen and closing contract conversion efforts as you grow. But start right away. Just don't keep scaling contract conversions without putting this more demand gen effort on the fire. And again, your founder brand is one of the cheapest, most efficient ways to do that. So you probably should.
Definitely. And as you alluded to then, finding that balance of not just the activities, but also the information as well. And I guess I suppose someone like yourself and even myself to a degree as well, really earn our dollars is not necessarily in the execution, because obviously the execution is important, but it's the ability to be able to interpret and read the quantitative and qualitative data, connect the dots, and actually form a story and an insight of, okay, this is working for us. This is what could possibly be causing a bottleneck or causing some challenges. Here's what we
Right.
should do next to test that. Because obviously there's, as you said before, there's no golden key to this is exactly how to run a successful ads campaign. There's
Yeah.
best practices and there's things that, documents, playbooks, etc. But it all always has a level of testing. Like we don't 100% know this is going to work from day one. So when you are starting to form some of those insights and obviously bring that back to your clients, founders, etc., what are some of the either leading, lagging indicators and some of the the quantitative elements that you look at to help form that story with your experience from sales and marketing?
Yeah, it depends on the motion in the org. Because like if you have an enterprise motion, some of these won't apply. If you have a free trial motion, some of those won't apply. But we mentioned a couple. Word of mouth lead gen exists and is hopefully increasing. That's one. So increasing month over month, regardless of the total amount, like that's a good metric. Some of the content you're putting out is doing well organically. Not everything, but some of it. Meaning, your average LinkedIn post gets 12 likes, one got 70 likes. Sweet. All right, there's a signal there.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff you're saying is going well. People talk, right? Just like people talk about your brand. When you post, people comment in a way that sort of shows they've heard of you before. The how you heard about us field on lead gen forms on your site has the same thing. People just mention the founder's name or the brand, or they say my friend referred me, or you just look at it and you're like, what is the sentiment of people as they hit your brand for the first time? If this was a physical storefront, you just sort of like look at who's coming in and what's on their face. Do the digital version of that. Like look at who's encountering your brand and what they're saying and the tone of all those interactions. If you want to be quantitative about it, you could analyze the sentiment of it. Everyone who comments on your posts, everyone who requests a meeting with your sales team, all that. But yeah, the word of mouth lead gen frequency, like the lead gen velocity increase is big. And then the organic content performance also really big. On the SEO side, you look for posts and URLs that gain organic rankings rapidly. That's a great sign that you're starting to be taken seriously by Google. So great, play to those strengths. Every channel has their own signs of organic performance. Brand has word of mouth, paid has like efficiency scores, and I'd probably defer to you and more what those are, but like you have, stuff that pops off and works well. Social, you have organic post performance. Sales, you have customer referrals, word of mouth, that type of thing. Look at every channel, look at the sort of organic early performance metrics on all of them. And basically the earlier you are, the more you're just sort of playing to your main strengths. The more you're trying to scale things, the more you're kind of having to go into all areas and saying, where can we, across these 5 different areas of investment, what's the most profitable area to invest in? At some point you're going to have pushed a lot of these channels to the max. But I've never really encountered an organization that's investing, well across all areas. There's almost always something where you're just spending more time and money over here, and really you could be doing better over here. There's companies that are doing no pay that should. There's companies that are doing way too much of the wrong pay that could reallocate or just change the way they're budgeting. Bloated SDR teams is a huge thing I'm seeing still. There's actually a lot less SDR headcount than there used to be, but frankly, there's still too much. So like an overstaffed SDR team is a big issue. I posted a while back of like how, the average sort of hypothetical 10-person SDR team should really be like 6 plus RevOps plus community plus forget the last one, but like I think it was like a social selling person for a total of like 8. So like you probably should decrease by 20% and reallocate a further 20-30% to different roles. Not the same people, but like that headcount. That's generally how I think about it, is like you're usually bloated in the classic areas, the lead gen areas. Most of those, as we've talked about, aren't working as well. So pull back, reallocate, partially reallocate from your bloated lead gen. Just spend less overall. Like a lot of revenues and clients come to us and increase revenues and agency spend during an overall period of marketing budget cut. They're just like tripling with us, but the overall budget went down by like 2/3. That our cut of it got way bigger because we're doing the things that scale better. That's the usual way I look at. Again, exceptions abound. Some orgs are like way better on organic, and they actually should do more lead gen, but you kind of got to get in and look at, which fallacy are they not seeing that they're committing, basically. Because it's hard for us to analyze our own selves. So that's kind of where the third party come in. You can kind of say, objectively, seems like this is the one.
Yeah, definitely. And especially it happens more prevalent inside orgs and I get it because I obviously, you and I have both been inside orgs, and you want to prove that your work is working. You want to prove that your job is doing the job that it's supposed to be. And one of the challenges that I try and move founders out of the mindset of is the siloed thinking. And you've hinted at it throughout the chat around like the power of strong organic foundations to boost ad performance. The power of, if you're showing up more in, say, Google Ads, you might or you might get more traffic that comes on LinkedIn, for example, because people click there, go to your website, then go back, check you out on socials. So this whole ecosystem effect starts to take place, and but founders, revenue leaders, marketing leaders, sales leaders get very stuck in siloed thinking of trying to prove their own department's success. I know we're running short of time, but for one final question, what's one of the areas that you help not only founders build obviously those strong organic foundations that you've touched on, but start to expand their thinking into more terms of an ecosystem effect to look at, okay, are we growing revenue as a whole?
It's funny you say that because when before Revenues In changed from its positioning of SEO and LinkedIn to just SEO, and we invest in LinkedIn agencies, I built a strategic narrative, as we talked about before, that tied both those together and why we chose both of these areas. And the title of it was basically ecosystem marketing. And that's exactly what we advocate doing is think of it less as channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, and just see that buyer journey as they're sort of encountering your orbit. They're encountering a bunch of other orbits too. They're like a comet floating around in space. All your buyers, they're floating around in space. They're being pulled into the gravities of all these different things. You just want yours to be the one that they end up landing on. And everyone works differently. The way to kind of convince every person that doesn't think that way to start thinking that way is just depending on their experience of how they look at things. Sometimes they look at this and say, like, how do you buy? What cold emails do you respond to? How do you buy things is a common one. The other one is like just sort of looking at who's doing well on LinkedIn and saying, okay, well, let's look at like growth rates of companies that are doing well on LinkedIn and ones that are not. You're going to find a higher percent of LinkedIn oriented companies doing higher growth rates often. And not all of them have the CEO still leading the personal brand. So like clearly there's some sort of correlation between the ecosystem they're building and the way at which the company is growing. But yeah, like everyone has this different path toward encountering that insight. Like there's this sort of insight that we've been talking about, which is like people don't buy like robots. My go-to-market is not a spreadsheet that can be solved. Like we're poking at that same insight, which is sort of an insight about human nature, and self-awareness of our own biases, kind of getting out of our own selves when we're in this tunnel vision of like, I have this much budget, I want these leads, I want this much revenue, and we think about that. We don't think about the people on the other end actually purchasing our solution, and the ability to mindfully step out of our own tunnel vision and into somebody else's position. That's the thing you have to be able to do. And that's like a life skill that's kind of hard to impart.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone arrives at it differently. And kind of like you alluded to, as consultants, we have to look at, are you already there? Are you on your path to getting there? Or are you like so far from being there that we're not going to have a good relationship until you at least get on the path? Which is why you ask people, what is your opinion on ads? Same, it sort of drives at that question, like how far along are you on this maturity path? Because
Yeah.
if you're too early, like we can't help it. You kind of have to be there already. Kind of like spiritual growth. You could have, the world's greatest spiritual teacher tell you the truth to your face, and you would, if you're not ready to hear it, you'd write it off as, not true or charlatanism. Same thing when we go to market. Like we could just bullet point out, like, here's the truth of how people buy. And you'll either be like, yeah, I feel like I get where you're coming from. Or you'll be like, yep, I'm there. Or you'll be like, no way, send more emails. If you're in the last camp, like we just can't help you. If you're on your way, great. We'll try to work on getting you there, to sort of see the ecosystem element of things. Um, The best ones are the ones who are already there. And then just like, okay, cool. We can just, speak as enlightened go-to-market folks and just do the job, which is, do all these channels well. Um, but yeah, I've had fun trying to help people encounter that insight in different ways and see all the different ways to do it. But everyone has their own way of getting there.
Which then ties back to one of your first points around the reason for putting out content, sharing your thoughts, sharing your ideas, because once you start doing that, and if you amplify it with ads or if you just rely on the algorithm, the people that start to come to you and the people you have conversations with, the leads you generate, are far enough down the path that you do have good conversations versus
Yeah,
looking or speaking to prospects that are looking for that silver bullet. Hey, can you help me grow my business? Well,
right.
what does that mean?
The silver bullet. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard Ashley Faust from Atlassian talk about this as like the playground effect of building the
Hmm.
playground so that if they want to go on the swings, they want to go on the slide, however they go their journey and they spend their lunch playtime, that's totally up to them. It's just your job to have those components of the ecosystem, those areas of the playground. So if they want to check you out on LinkedIn, they can find you there. They want to check you out on YouTube, they can find you there. And the more areas that they can consume your content and consume your approach in the way that they want to consume it, the better your results are going to be. And again, you're going to attract ideally prospects who are already bought into to a degree the way that you think and operate. Um, so, Alex, I know we are just about short of time. Just as one parting question, actually, what does the next 12 months look like for Alex, Aware, and Revenue Zen?
Hopefully the next couple of days looks like completing this acquisition um, for Aware of another company. For Revenue Zen, it's continuing to empower the leadership team that's in place there and raising Unfolio stock price in the process. Our acquirer is publicly traded, so we're trying to get that thing up to at least 250, $3 if we can by the end of the year.
Uh-huh.
And then for Aware, it hopefully looks like 2.5xing our current revenue if possible over the next 12 months. That would be great. I think we can do that. Um, while spending as little money as possible on marketing, maybe not as little as possible, but not too much. So
Yep.
continuing to have it cash flow very well while we do that. Um, and just well, for Alex as well, just like continuing to explore more of my passions and do more investments and grow my own ecosystem. Um, Apart from just the ecosystem of my businesses, I'm thinking about, what does my own ecosystem look like in the marketplace? Um, and even questions like, is that confined to B2B? I'm dealing with that question right now. It's an obvious choice to say yes, so that's where I played all my life. But there's a part of me that's like, okay, well, what would it look like to expand that? So we'll see about that. Um, but most of all, I'm in kind of like not a transition period, but I'm in like I put in a really, really hard 7, 8 years, really close to like 10 years. It's been a hard burn on like gaining a lot of skills, doing a lot of stuff, like having some accomplishments racking up with acquisitions and exits. And now it's like, okay, well, we had that really hard burn. Uh, I can sort of see the time, after Aware's eventual acquisition by another company. Um, and that's the part that I can't see past in my like vision brain. And
Yep.
I've realized that, okay, that's a sign. I used to be able to see what the next thing was, and now I can't. Um, so maybe I'll just focus on the present. So I can see about 12 months out, but not too much further than that. So it's good that you asked me about a year. And if you had said, what's 5 years from now, I'd be like, I have no idea.
No
One
clue.
year, I can tell you pretty well. 5 years, two, I don't know. But those are some of the questions I'm working with right now.
Interesting. It obviously sounds like you're going to be on not only a business growth path, obviously, as you continue to grow those, but a self-growth path as well over the short to long-term period. For anyone that wants to follow that journey and see where you do end up, not only 12 months, but 5 years from now, where's best to find you?
LinkedIn's still the best place. I see myself, that's probably going to be a consistent thread. I don't see myself doing a big Irish goodbye from LinkedIn. Um, wouldn't put it past me 100%, but like that's almost certainly going to be the place that people can come to have me just direct traffic on what I'm working on, where I'm going, and what I'm doing right now.
Yep. Awesome. So, Alex, thanks for jumping on. We've gone through a lot of topics and I think pulled together some threads that I think people will find very interesting when they watch back through this. So again, thank you for taking the time to come on. And for everyone listening, I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much.